Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Patrick Jones, and on this episode, I wanted to talk about my own personal college recruiting experience. And I think by just sharing and hearing other stories of other people's recruitment and how they got recruited and the mistakes that they made, I think it can also help those going through the process right now. And so I look at a lot of the things that I see today, and a lot of it reminds me of some of the mistakes that I made and some of the things that I did that I'm going to share in this episode. So a little bit of my own playing background. I mean, I was always a pretty decent athlete, a pretty good athlete. I was a pretty good athlete. I mean, I was always 6'7" below runner. So pretty good, pretty fast, decent arm, usually mid to high 80s from the outfield, somewhere right around there. Exit velocity, not too bad either. But I was very raw. I didn't lift weights very much. I think back then, I guess it was back then, 15 years ago or so, was when I was in 30 now. So yeah, 15 years ago, I was 15 years old. So back then, lifting was definitely a thing. I would say I didn't buy into it as very much because I honestly, as weird as it sounds now, I thought it would kind of hurt my swing, which sounds insane to say right now, but that's the way I thought back then. And so I was very raw. I was very raw, and I would say I saw some of my other teammates getting some attention and getting some looks from college coaches, and was like, man, like when am I going to get my looks and this and that. And I would say the first time I started to get any type of real attention was the summer heading into my senior year. And I had a pretty good summer. Definitely had some schools that were interested in me. And, I really felt that I was starting to take a next step as a player. I mean, I thought I was going to, I even had, some different MLB scouts come look at me. And so my head got pretty big pretty quickly. And so I had several schools looking at me. Ended up getting 3 different offers. I got an offer from Dayton. I got an offer from West Virginia. And I ended up getting an offer from Xavier too. However, for me, my obsession since the time I was a kid was playing in the major leagues. And I always wanted to play on the biggest stage of every level that I was at. And so I was obsessed with playing in the SEC. Like, I wanted to play in the SEC so bad. It was the best baseball league. It still probably is. And so I wanted to play in the SEC. And so I had three Division I scholarship offers. I got them all in the fall of my senior year. So, I mean, it was about right now. When this video is coming out, October, I got 3 of them just bang, bang, bang really quick. And I had nothing at all before then. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I get these 3 offers. And I'm like, man, I viewed myself as this big time player. So I wanted the Kentuckys and the Vanderbilts and the Tennessees and Georgias and all these big time places. And I didn't obviously have any of those. And so I was like, man, if I went to a JUCO for a year or two, I could either A, get drafted and then go start my professional career, or B, I could transfer then to one of these SEC schools. And I reflect back on that all the time, and I work with a lot of kids now and helping them with their own college recruiting. And so I am reminded of how a 17-year-old thinks a lot, because I'm speaking to my former self. And as I reflect back on that experience, I think about that was one of the stupidest almost mistakes I made of my entire life, right? I had 3 Division I offers with money, scholarship money, like baseball money, and I was gonna turn down those 3 offers in hopes of getting a higher offer or at a bigger school by going to a JUCO. Like, how insane is that? And that's the mind of a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old, an 18-year-old, right? They're kids, and my mind was no different. And the thing is, my parents didn't know. They weren't college coaches. They had no idea what to do and necessarily. And so I legitimately, the day before signing day, I called up Xavier because I had narrowed it down. I was going to be Xavier or I was going to go to this junior college. And so I called up Xavier and I said, I'm not going to come. I'm actually going to go to this junior college but I appreciate everything. Thank you. And I can't believe, I mean, it was crazy. And so I hung up the phone, and so I was going to go to this junior college. And then my uncle ended up calling me that same night because he knew the signing day was the next day, and he wanted to know what decision I was going to make out of the three offers that I had. And so I told him, and he paused for a long second, and he's like, "Man, you had three offers from three schools that wanted you, okay? Three schools that wanted you, and you're going to take a chance and go and play at a school that you don't know much about. You're the one who reached out to them. They didn't really reach out to you. On the chance that maybe you have a good year and don't get hurt and end up being able to play in the SEC. What happens if you get hurt? What happens if you get to college and something else happens, or you never know what's going to happen when you move away from home for the first time?" He's like, what's the backup plan? What's your long-term backup plan? Like, you go to a school like Xavier or Dayton or whatever, you have a really good degree that's going to set you up for the rest of your life. You go to some JUCO, you may never know what's going to happen. And so it finally clicked for me after my uncle said that to me. He's like, "Man, this is going to be a big mistake if you do this." And so I really thought about it. And my uncle John is his name, and he's always been someone I've looked up to. And so since he wasn't a parent, but he was somebody that I looked up to, his word, it just resonated with me differently. And I'm sure parents out there watching or listening to this can probably resonate with that too. I was no different as a kid. And so I got off the phone with him, and I realized, man, I need to call back Xavier and ask them if the offer's still good, and then I'm gonna go to Xavier. And legitimately within 30 minutes, I called Xavier and told him I'm not coming. I talked to my uncle, and then I called Xavier back and said, "Hey, if the offer's still good, send over the paperwork in the morning, and I'll sign it and send it and fax it over." And I called him back, and they said, "Yeah, the offer's still good." And so I signed it the next morning and ended up going to Xavier. It was the best 5 years. I mean, it was an incredible experience, great people, and a whole experience is one of the reasons why I say the things that I say to the players I help with recruiting. Just because if you go somewhere where you're wanted, for one, they're going to be a little bit more patient with you if you don't go there and produce right away. Right? If you look back at my numbers in college, like, I had some injuries. I didn't play very well my freshman year. At any other place in the country, I would have been out of there. Like, the coach would have ran me off. But Coach Guggens and Coach Oddie and Coach O'Connor and all those guys, like, they were patient with me, and they didn't run me off. They continued to work with me. And so there's so much value and merit into going someplace where you're wanted because of that. And so I learned that. And I learned that, hey, sometimes just because you want to go to the biggest stage and the biggest level, it's not always the best fit for you right then. Because if I would have let's just say I got that offer from Kentucky or Vanderbilt or Tennessee. If they would have said, "Here's a walk-on spot," I would have went in a heartbeat. And I would have convinced myself that I would have made the team and been able to get playing time and have played right away. We played Kentucky at midweek my freshman year. I would have been. I wouldn't even have sniffed the field. I wouldn't have even gotten at bat that freshman year had I gone to an SEC school or a big time school, and I would have been at a JUCO. Probably after the fall ball of my freshman year, I would have been at a JUCO by the spring had I gone to one of those bigger Power 5 schools. I mean, it was just not even close where I thought I was versus where I needed to be. And so that brings me to my last and final point is, you're going to end up where you're supposed to end up right now. That doesn't mean that down the road things happen or whatever and you go somewhere and you produce whatever. I mean, things are crazy right now in the way the college recruiting is going, whether we like it or not. But you need to go somewhere where you're wanted. You need to go somewhere where you have a chance to compete, to play right away. And one of the mistakes that I made is I thought about always playing in the major leagues, and that was my dream. That was always my dream. but I didn't necessarily have the plan or guidance to get there. I just thought that, well, if I just play really well at the highest levels, that's what's going to allow me to get to the major leagues. Well, in order to become a better player, you have to develop. You have to play. You need a lot of at-bats if you're a position player. You need a lot of innings on the mound if you're a pitcher. And if you go somewhere, even if it is at a very high level and you're not getting those, nobody's drafting you just because you go to Vanderbilt and you're sitting the bench. I coached in the Orioles organization, Baltimore Orioles organization, for 2 years, and on both years I helped out with the draft and worked with the scouting department. We weren't looking at players who, just because they played in an SEC school, we weren't thinking about drafting them just because they were at Georgia or Vanderbilt or any of these big schools, Arizona, wherever you want to say. We were thinking about drafting players who produced, who had a track record, even if it was at a mid-major school or even a Division II school or whatever it was. Their freshman year that they got a lot of at-bats, they played well. Sophomore year, junior year, every year they're playing, they're accumulating a lot of at-bats, a lot of experience. In the summertime, a lot of at-bats, a lot of experience. Pitchers on the mound, throwing, a lot of innings, all that stuff. And so if your end goal, start out with your end goal and then reverse engineer back to, okay, here's my end goal. Now I need to reverse engineer back and, okay, what are the steps I need to take to actually get there? And that's would be my recommendation to everybody else based on my own recruiting experience. And, I am, in a sense, sometimes my Uncle John to a lot of the players that I help with recruiting. And sometimes that's tough love. Sometimes it's being honest, just how he was with me, because that one conversation with him changed my entire life. I don't know if I'd be here right now speaking into this microphone had he not been honest with me. And if he would just been a yes man saying, oh, yeah, you'll figure it out, love you, if you ever need anything, I'm always here for you, I probably wouldn't be here right now. Who knows what I'd be doing, but I probably wouldn't be in baseball. I think my life would have took a completely different turn. So that's kind of my own recruiting story. It's pretty unique one, and as I think about it and I see a lot of the things online, and sometimes I get frustrated. A lot of times that's because I'm frustrated because I feel I know I'm looking at my younger self and how unintelligent I was. That's the nice way I'm going to put it. Because you're 17, 16 years old and you don't know what you don't know. And from a parent's perspective, like my parents, for example, they didn't know and they wanted to make me happy, and so trying to figure everything out, it was hard. If you're not from that industry, it's hard to really relate. Like right now, I know the ins and outs of everything because I do it every day of the week. But back then, I didn't know. And so I hope just sharing my story, my recruiting story, how crazy it was, how insane I was back then as a kid, helps someone out there who's going to be listening or watching this, and just helps you realize, where you want to go and then the route in order to which you need to get there too. And the last piece of advice I would give to myself, and this is, again, tough love, if I was speaking to myself back then, is you're not even as close to as good as you need to be. Like you think you're so much better than you actually are. It's not even funny compared to the big dogs out there who were out playing at the top level. So there's a part of it as just because you're the best in your area, your region, your state, or whatever, you're competing against players from all over the country, and now other countries too, because there's a lot of Canadians, really good players coming in as well, and from other places. So that would be my last piece of advice to myself: is you're not as good as you think you are, and sometimes I have to relay that message, right now to the kids I work with as well. And that's out of tough love. And so that's, start working harder. And that's what I had to do. I had to start working harder. So hope that helped. It's something that, I think about on a regular basis because I am in the recruiting space right now with players on a daily basis. And I just wanted to share that. I hope it helps. At the end of the day, you will play the best when you're out there having fun. And I think if you can go out there and have fun, and for me, the other thing I would say is I never had a backup plan. And if I would have actually had a backup plan, it actually would have helped take some of that stress off of me, right? Where like, hey, you know what? If this doesn't work out, I can always do something else. Maybe in other areas in business and other areas that's not as applicable, having that mindset. But I would say as mental as baseball is, it can be very helpful knowing that you don't have to produce in that moment and you're going to be okay long term too. So that would be another piece of advice I'd have. So hope that helped. Make sure to subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out anytime. My email is jonesbaseballtraining@gmail.com, and hope everybody has a great day.